the fourth one now. But the last one was the first one where you were joining anyone else, right? Yeah. Oh, totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. No, it's weird. I mean, we've been like trying to, not trying. We've been keeping the podcast going, but it's a constant troubleshooting thing. Especially because it's like we finally feel like we figured out how to do it ourselves, and then anytime we have a guest on, suddenly new complications enter. Either they're using different equipment to record or a different program and the different file type, and then like it's just fun new discoveries every time. Okay, let me see. True, 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 true. We can't hear Dan or Greg. We can hear the guest, is what I'm seeing in the comments. Uh, 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 uh. Fun, 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 fun. Okay. Let me see. I can only hear Griffin. They're back. No audio. Greg is muted. Can't hear Dan or Greg. Ah! Yeah. I'm going to translate everything that Dan and Greg are saying until you can hear the two of them. We're all fighting technical difficulties here. Right before we went live, we were talking about fighting technical difficulties. So everything's going according to plan, exactly as we anticipated. Yeah, sure, sure. You kill it so it can come back and get stronger. That's the way streams work.
Test, test, test.
Hmm?
That make a difference, anybody? We are working on it.
Dan, Greg, anything you want me to relate?
Tell them we said hi. We haven't heard from them in a while. Love them a lot. I'd say plug your show at least while you're on here for now.
I had no problem with audio before. I don't know why suddenly.
It was a video thing. Someone said I can hear the guy from Split. I appreciate that. James McAvoy's a very handsome man. I'll take that as a compliment. Oh, people can hear you now. We're getting everybody.
No, I can hear the guy from Split. Nope, yep, there. Now we can hear you, but faint.
Now I can hear the TG guys. We're all good now, all working.
Okay.
Well, you fixed it.
Amazing.
When in doubt, press all the buttons.
You just gotta push them.
Stop
That's what you
pressing the
gotta do.
buttons.
We got
Yeah.
further confirmation that we
Yes.
can,
No,
that we can be heard.
We have confirmation from around the city and around the world, and also within this
Perfect.
residence that we're actually being heard by people now. So that's good. Hey,
We are global.
this is standard operating procedure. We try to complicate it a little bit more each week, and we did it again. Good job, everybody.
Officially complicated.
Yeah.
I never even had to do that before. We did a test stream during the week, and everybody could hear everybody. I didn't need to do anything. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you to everybody that has joined us. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks for everybody who got here early and is hanging out and whatever else. Our guest today is Griffin Newman.
Hello.
From Amazon. Is it Amazon's The Tick or is it just The Tick? What's the official title?
The official title is just The Tick, but that makes it hard to differentiate from the other versions of The Tick. They all have the same title. So I say Amazon's The Tick, even though they are the ones who mercilessly canceled us.
Amazon's The Tick. Upcoming Masters of the Universe. Is that
Revelation?
Revelations?
I'm wearing my Orko shirt.
Oh,
right now.
Is that vintage or is that new?
This is a new one with the vintage design. Let me see if I can stand up for a second. I like this one because it looks like it's like Orko on a pizza box. I don't know if that was the...
It's the checkerboard.
Yeah, exactly.
Checkerboard meets pizza.
Yeah.
And you'll be playing Orko in it. You'll be voicing Orko. That's what
I will. I am the new Orko, and I've recorded a majority of the season.
Oh, really?
And who knows where it all stands right now because of all the production delays. But I've done the majority of my work, and I think people are remotely animating it. So hopefully it will come out still vaguely on schedule.
But in the meantime,
yes,
you are podcasting.
I am podcasting. I have a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David, which I host with David Sims, who is a film critic, and we go through the entire filmographies of different directors who got blank check status, so to speak, got to make whatever they wanted. So we're in the midst of doing George Miller now. So covering all the Mad Max movies and the Happy Feet movies.
So I'll just let you guys talk.
We're not here for movies.
That's not true. We're here for whatever. We're here for whatever anybody wants to talk about. Greg's just a much bigger movie person than I am in terms of what he's seen, what he's knowledgeable about, things he can name about people who were involved in those productions. In the meantime, and maybe we should just jump right into this, I watched Trolls 2 last night. So.
Oh boy. Okay, I haven't seen it yet. I will say, I mean, in that sense, I'm kind of the bridge between the two of you in my weird collection of arcane knowledge about both movies and toys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my hope is to unify
the two sides. Why did you watch Trolls 2 last night?
Because I like it. I liked Trolls 1. We liked it a lot, and we're counting down the days until the actual Trolls 2 came out and couldn't wait to see it. And so
you mean Trolls World Tour?
Trolls 2, not Trolls 2. Yeah.
Not
Troll 2, totally different movie. You've probably seen Troll 2. You've probably seen Troll 2.
Yes, I think that's the reason why they called it Trolls World Tour and not Trolls 2, because they wanted to avoid the association with Troll 2. I have to imagine.
Possibly, but I doubt the target audience would ever make that mistake.
Fair enough. I just saw the first Trolls for the first time a couple nights ago, because we did it for an episode on the podcast, a Patreon thing. It does not fit into the usual confines of what we cover on the show. I felt very overwhelmed by it.
Trolls.
Original Trolls, I felt very overwhelmed by.
Overwhelmed by just sort of a visual stimulus coming at you?
Visual stimulus, oral stimulus, all of it.
I would assume that those movies are just crazy.
See,
they are. They are just chaos. I mean, that's fair to say, right? But I don't say that in a negative way.
But there was heart. You found the heart, right?
Was that?
They are earnest chaos. So, certainly, they're heartfelt chaos. Now, the two people I did the podcast episode with, our friend Richard Lawson, who writes for Vanity Fair, and then my co-host David, they have both seen Trolls World Tour since we recorded. I have not. David said, inarguably better than the first one. Richard said, nowhere near as good as the first one. I'm curious to hear where you land. Because those are the only two opinions I've heard so far.
Have they seen the holiday special? Because the holiday special is good too.
This is all too much.
No, so you're all in on Trolls.
It's good.
I'm not judging you. I'm just asking. I'm trying to get a sense of the landscape here. So
Here's the thing.
Holiday special, Trolls World Tour. Okay.
Part 2 advanced the mythology of the world so much that I don't know where they can go in 3.
Because there are no Bergens in 2, right?
Not true.
Really?
Yeah, stick around to the end.
Okay. Because 2, I was like, there's a lot of dense mythology about their relationship to the Bergens, this other species, and then World Tour seemingly is on its own different game.
So
I don't know any of this. I haven't seen either of them, nor do I have any intention.
Yeah. So World Tour is a pretty heavy political commentary with a very strong progressive message. And I don't say that ironically. I don't say that. Sure. That's legit. I put down my steak and cheese at a certain point because I was like, I can't even believe that what they're saying right now. Like I was I almost started tweeting during the movie. Like
God, I need to watch World Tour now.
What else are you gonna do? Watch another movie, man.
I know. Yeah, no, it's all I'm doing. It's very weird. I don't know.
That's all I'm doing too.
I don't know if the two of you are experiencing this. And I watch a lot of stuff in general. I'm watching even more stuff all day, every day now. And then when people ask me what I've been watching, I can't remember anything. It's like the content has been such a constant stream that suddenly it's like trying to remember the differences between which morning I brush my teeth.
Well, how much would you say that you intended to sit down and say, this is a thing that I've been wanting to watch, this is a thing I'm looking forward to watching, as opposed to just, I got 6 hours to kill, what am I going to watch? Because I got to believe that the stuff you actually seek out to watch is more impactful.
I'd say it's 50-50. I'd say like half of it's like, oh, I want to fill this blind spot, or this is a thing that can kill some time, or rewatching a thing I've seen many times just because I'm like, this is the mood I need right now. I know it will hit the spot. And then 50% of it is me trying to be like, this is stuff I've been meaning to see for a long time. I'm going to make this a real focused watch, long overdue. But the only stuff that seems to stick in my head is the stuff that I've watched and we then podcasted about, only because there's the additional memory of having to talk about it.
Right.
Otherwise, I like open up my browser and try to see what I've been watching recently and go, oh, right. It's not that I forgot the thing existed. It's that I'm no longer able to delineate between separate watchings, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm in like the Wall-E, the cruise ship, where I just have the screen in front of me and I'm just zooming around watching stuff nonstop.
Yeah.
So my sort of situation is slightly different in that I have this weird thing, and I don't know anybody else that has this, but I have this sort of weird thing where even if I have a whole day of nothing going on, my wife and I are sitting around with absolutely nothing to do, I can't start watching movies before like 11 a.m. Usually actually noon or 1 o'clock, because it's more of a later in the day thing. I don't know why that is. So I purposely seek stuff out. I'm not sitting around going, oh, I've got all this time to kill or whatever. It's like we get ready to build up to, and then watch a and then start.
You make a special presentation at the end of every day. Your special feat.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Even if the end of that day is 1:30 in the afternoon.
Sure.
Still, we're sitting down, and I've got 3 movies that we want to watch, and I know how long each one of them is and how long it's going to take, and that's so it's all planned out. So luckily, I'm not sort of overwhelmed by the wave of content yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I will say, I want to take a nap.
Yes.
What movie should I put on?
That's very much the zone that I'm in. Yes. Yeah. It's like, what's a good thing to watch to wake me up? What's a good thing to watch to put me to sleep? What's a good nap thing? What's a good thing to while eating? Like, it's just, I need, or it's podcasts or it's whatever, but it's like, I need something to keep me occupied.
Yeah.
Right, because you're active in that consumption of that media. You're watching it with a purpose. For me, a lot of the stuff that I end up putting on is literally just background noise. It's like, I don't want the residents to be quiet. I want there to be some activity, some noise. So it's like, what can I just put on for noise? Now, if there's actually a movie I want to watch, like Trolls World Tour,
you rolled out the red carpet.
Intent, we turn the lights down, we get some snacks, and we watch the movie.
Yeah.
And I remember all of it.
Sure.
In detail.
It's a 48-hour rental. I still got another chance to watch it 2 or 3 more times before.
I know. I kind of question that, because it's like, obviously all these studios are having to adjust now, put these things up early, on VOD and on iTunes and everything. But I feel like all the other movie studios have made it where you pay $20 and you own the movie. It's just, there's no rental option. You have to pay full price, but you own it. Like, that's what like Disney did with Onward and Sony with Bloodshot. And then Universal has done their wave of Trolls, Invisible Man, Emma, and what's the fourth one? The Hunt, yes. Yep. All 4 of which I want to see, and I'm a little bit angry about the fact that it's $20 48-hour rental. I'm like, am I going to pay $80 to watch those 4 movies one time in my home? Or, like you, get as many viewings of Trolls Tour in within a 48-hour frame?
Well, and there was 2 of us watching it, so that's already cheaper than if we had gone to the theater.
Sure.
Not that I don't want to go to the theater. I hope theaters survive and can come back
Yes.
after this. I still think that's an important part of the movie-going experience, not just the size of the screen and the quality of the sound, but experiencing it with people who want to watch the movie.
Yes, I'm a real purist with that. It's been the thing that I've been struggling most with during this, because it's like, I feel like I tend towards the hermetic and the antisocial. I like to be alone with my own thoughts and everything. So when I'm not being social, the thing I push myself to do to leave the house to go do something is go sit in a dark room with strangers and watch a movie. But also I feel like going out to the theater is like my big mood stabilizer in a lot of ways. It's like kind of like my reset button. And so it's tough to not be able to do that. Yeah. And I'm watching stuff at home, but it's not the same experience for me.
I can see. Is that Bloodshot in the background?
That is Bloodshot. That's my McFarlane
right
Bloodshot.
here, this tiny little Bloodshot in the
Yes.
background.
Which I've watched Bloodshot twice now. He never looks like he does in the action figure. It's a rare instance of seemingly an action figure being based solely off of concept art.
Okay, that's not rare.
This is pretty dramatic, the difference between how he looks in the movie and looks in the figure.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't. No.
Okay, we haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it.
It's interesting to me. Yeah.
I've seen that it's taken over your social media in the last couple of days at least.
Yes, I've by default become America's number 1 Bloodshot defender.
Well, somebody was going to be.
Someone was going to be, and Ben's been weirdly quiet, so I think it's me now. Yeah.
Were you a fan of the book at all, of the actual? Because I was shocked just that they were even making a movie. I mean, it's out, you can watch it, and I'm still like, that's not happening. They're not really doing that.
Yeah. No, I was not really a fan of the comic. I love Jeff Lemire. I never know which way his name is pronounced, but the comic book artist, writer who did Sweet Tooth and Descender and Black Hammer, and lots of great stuff. He did a run on Bloodshot called Bloodshot Reborn that I loved, that I read. Outside of that, I had no real frame of reference for the character. My feeling is if you were a big Bloodshot fan, you probably like this movie less than someone like me who is going to it for
I mean, that's a lot for
Diesel action movie-ish.
Yeah, well, I think there are certainly fewer commenters online complaining that it didn't stick to the subject matter, the source material. You know, I wouldn't know the difference.
Yes, same here. Yeah,
I hadn't read any of it.
Yeah, it feels like it's really just kind of using that as a launching pad and little else.
Yeah, it was probably affordable movie rights, and then when you attach Vin Diesel to it, you're good to go.
And I'll tell you a thing I have learned from my experience working on a cult superhero comic book property with The Tick is that a lot of these studios, the people who put up the money to make these things, don't understand the relative scale of popularity. They just think that anything that's a comic book is the Avengers. So they go, oh, it's like a comic book. It's like a superhero thing. I'll make Avengers money. I felt like constantly when we were making The Tick, when they were like advertising it, when we were like shooting the posters and stuff, I'd be talking to different people at the chain at Amazon who I would want to ask, like, this is a weird cult thing, right? Like, this is the third version of a cult property where the 2 previous versions were canceled prematurely. Where it was like deemed not mainstream enough, where it's a really weird specific thing. And it just felt like they constantly just thought like, no, we get it. But like, it's Avengers, right? Like everyone's going to watch this.
Is it like a Hello Fellow Children thing, right? They're just so out of touch.
I think there's a little bit of that and a little bit of just anything that's nerdy hits them as like white noise.
Okay.
And they're just like, I don't know, people are like obsessed with this shit, right? Like they come at it from that attitude. They're like, I don't know, I just hear like nerds talking about stuff all the time. They seem to like all of this stuff.
Well, and there's that lack of appreciation of the subtleties of the... Right. There's a range of comic book properties. Yes, there's things like the Avengers or Batman, but then there's also things like Watchmen, which, have subtext. And then there's things like The Tick, which have parody of the genre itself, both as a comic book and superheroes, and then as a film. So if you can't work those levels in, then why are you using The Tick? You know?
No, that was very frustrating. I mean, it was like one of these things where, like, it felt like, you know, I had no say in the way the show was marketed, but I was constantly part of it because, you know, I either needed to be speaking or photographed or whatever it was, along with Peter Serafinowicz, who played the Tick on the show. The two of us were usually kind of front and center in that advertising material. And it felt like half the time they totally got it was a comedy and were promoting it from a comedy angle. And half the time they would try to promote it like it was an action show.
Like they're going to trick somebody into it.
Yeah.
I made you watch 2 seasons.
Right. Like, if you try to make this look like an action show, it's going to look like a bad action show. That's not the foot we should be leading with. But also, in the process, you're failing to draw the attention of the people who would want to see a parody of superhero shows. Like, my thing was, like, here's a show that's a satire of comic books and superhero media, but it's very affectionate. If you love this stuff, if you know all the tropes really well, this should be appealing to you. And if you're totally disinterested in this stuff and it all, like, is white noise for you, then this should be appealing to you because we're sort of poking fun at it. And it just felt like they never could decide where they landed with that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it was a weird thing. Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that played into the ultimate cancellation of it, because it was still trying to find that actual core audience, which even if it found it, was not necessarily to the level that Amazon may have, you know, that the execs may have thought that they were actually going to be reaching.
Yes, I think there were like 3 because people ask me all the time what happened, and they want some, like, you know, big, like, conspiracy theory story or some really salacious
You asked for too much money.
Right. I assure you it wasn't that. But it was like a 3-pronged thing that was, I think they started the show with unrealistic expectations, especially because now they've done The Boys, but this was their first superhero thing. And we were making it at the same time that Netflix was doing all the Marvel shows. And that set like a benchmark in terms of what they thought they should be doing. You know, there was a clear analog to, like, here's another streaming service. They have slightly more adult-driven TV series based on superheroes that are live action. This is what we should be doing. Not understanding that those are bigger Marvel characters. It's a totally different tone, all of that. So I think that was one. And, you know, those expectations were hard to meet, and it was an expensive show to do, because even if it's a comedy, you still have to have special effects and costumes and stunts and all these things that are still expensive to do, even if you're doing the funny version of them. Even if you're not trying to make it look realistic, it still takes a lot of human effort and work and hours and money and all of that. 2 is, I think they just never figured out how to sell it exactly and find what the core audience was. And then 3 was the entire regime in charge at Amazon Video between season 1 and season 2 changed.
Okay.
And so it was one of those things where it was like the new team came on and they were like, what is this?
Yeah.
Explain this to me. So we didn't even then have the people who had developed the show and were fighting for it, who I think at that point were disappointed in the fact that it hadn't hit as hard as they wanted, but were emotionally invested in it. Then those people were out the window, and these new people were like, why am I taking care of this? This is not my responsibility?
Yeah.
And most of the Amazon shows got canceled at that point. I mean, they canceled all but 4 or 5 shows.
I'm guessing that's relatively common in situations like that, where the new team comes in, they don't have the same affinity for those old projects. They're trying to make their name on their new projects instead of carrying over your old project.
No, I mean, it's even like, it's a crazy thing to think about, but it came out recently that the reason Steve Carell left The Office, and the perception was always that, well, he was a big star, he had done the show for 8 years, he was doing all these movies, he just didn't want to do it anymore. But all the people in charge at NBC changed, and they changed right when his contract was up, and no one ever reached out to him about negotiating a new contract. They never even started the conversation with him. because for the new people, they were like, The Office, I don't know, is this what we want to be doing? I think we want to do stuff more like Modern Family. Like anytime a new person takes over at like a streaming service or a TV channel or whatever, they always come out with a totally new idea of what the entire thing is going to be. Yep. Like, we want to make shows like this, and we don't want to make shows like this anymore.
Right.
So I did a pilot for NBC at that time when that was happening, and they were very clearly saying, we don't want to do things for comedy nerds. It was one of those things where they were like, 30 Rock is ending, Steve Carell's leaving The Office, we canceled all the other nerdy shows, Parks and Rec was continuing, but like everything else was gone. I was on a comedy nerd pilot that was just like thrown out for that very reason. And they let Steve Carell get away because they were like, that's not really the kind of show we want to do anymore. And now, 10 years later, The Office is still the most popular comedy.
Yeah,
I think it's bigger now than it was.
Unquestionably. Unquestionably.
Yep.
But it just kind of goes to show just like the people come in and they kind of scorched earth it and just start afresh. I mean, it's even like not to try to transition too forcefully to the other subject, but it's like sort of like something that you saw happen when Hasbro got the Marvel license. And there were all the things that like Toy Biz had been doing well. And then Hasbro came in and like started out, I would argue, very poorly.
I would agree.
And particularly immediately lowered the bar on Marvel Legends. And then the sales dropped. And then they went like, well, I guess people just don't like Marvel Legends.
Yeah,
as opposed to, I guess we're not doing it well enough.
Yeah.
And so the thing was just sort of like barely still in release or on the back burner on ice for like the better part of a decade. And then when they brought it back, suddenly it became the biggest thing, It's like the most reliable sort of action figure line now. But there is that kind of thing where I think people are resentful towards anything they inherit in situations like that. And they either want to like remake it in their own image, which either really works or really doesn't, or they want to push that aside for their new thing and go like, it's 3 3/4 inch and that's all it is right now. And that's the kind of company we are.
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing gets traction better than number one. Like comics are constantly rebooting because nothing sells like a number one. Let's do the origin. That's the best story. That's the one everyone knows. That's going to get the most hype. So of course, let's start everything over. In defense of canceling The Office, I still haven't seen like the last 3 seasons. So.
Oh, totally. Look, they should have canceled it at the point they canceled it. The thing they shouldn't have done was let Steve Carell leave. The reason the last 2 seasons are bad is because he was gone.
Right. Right.
Like the show never recovered from that, and they let him get away because it's not worth it.
Right.
It's all weird.
Somebody in the chat asked how was it working with Peter Serafinowicz? Good guy.
Really, really, really great guy. He's a really, really sweet guy, and he's so like. He's existed in so many pop culture nerd spheres. Like, he's in Shaun of the Dead and has worked with Edgar Wright a bunch, and he's the voice of Darth Maul, and he's in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's done so much voiceover stuff like Rick and Morty. Like, he's touched so many different worlds. I was a big fan of his. And even just his stuff, he created 2 of his own TV shows in England, which are both amazing. Look Around You, which is like a fake educational science show from the 70s, and then he has on sketch.
I've seen a few episodes of that.
Look Around You's unbelievable.
Yeah.
For people looking for things to watch, I think a lot of it's on YouTube, and it's amazing.
I think that's where I saw it, yeah.
But he's an incredibly nice guy and a really, really funny guy. And it was like, because The Tick and Arthur are so much a comedy team, it's so much about the 2 of them together, and they rarely have scenes without each other. It helped that I mostly come from a comedy background, a far less successful and famous comedy background than he does. But we have the same sort of approach to working. And it was just like very collaborative because we had to figure out how to make, I would say it was like harmonizing, because it's like he could figure out how to play the Tick and I could figure out how to play Arthur. But if we didn't sound right together, then the whole thing, it was irrelevant. It didn't matter. So he was a really great guy to work with.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So you live in New York City right now. And
I live in New York City. I live in like...
have forever.
Yeah, my whole life. Yeah.
So I know we obviously were talking about movies and the sort of hermit lifestyle that
Yeah.
was self-inflicted before.
Sure. Sure.
Day to day, I've spent a lot of time in the past just being self-employed, working from home.
Yeah.
So I know that that's a lifestyle that takes sort of a certain personality.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Being in New York City as you are with the world as it is right now, is your daily life a lot different? Are you staying? Do you have less options even though you were staying in to begin with? Is it more than
There's
just
there's a difference between
Yeah.
choosing to stay in and being
yeah?
forced.
That's
to
where I'm
stay in.
going. That was the shorter
Yes.
version.
Right. I mean, the choice is the single biggest difference. I'm trying to get a little more light here. The choice is definitely the single biggest difference. There's a certain claustrophobia that comes from feeling like you can't choose to go out, even if you are someone who often stays home. And it's also that my life was very often, because of what I do for a living and even the stuff I do that I don't get paid for, like doing comedy shows around the city. Sometimes I get paid for them, but a lot of, just doing people's podcasts and doing live shows and all this sort of stuff. It's this oscillation between like being a homebody and doing aggressively social things, doing things where I'm performing in front of a crowd or recording something to put out there to the public or filming stuff on a set with a lot of people. And now all of that stuff is gone. And any way in which I'm doing that stuff is like this, is in a very isolated, remote way. I mean, our podcast we're now doing remotely. I'm doing voiceover stuff for animation remotely. It's very weird. And I also, I'm not married. I don't have a roommate. I'm living like alone, which I usually, really value. Because I like having some solidarity and solidarity with myself, I guess I mean to say.
Right. Well, and that's usually your escape from
Totally.
the constant, everything. Yeah.
Right. It's like I kind of designed a life over years around being able to get an escape from this sort of career stuff that I love doing, but is also stressful and all-encompassing and all of that. And now it's definitely strange. And it also is. It's just like, we're the city getting hit hardest with this in the world. I mean, there's just a very eerie feeling here. And so it makes you particularly on guard. And it's geographically a small place with a tremendous amount of people. So everyone's really stacked on top of each other, which means that the paranoia runs really high in terms of how infectious everyone is or isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and
most of them staying in, I go out like once a week for groceries and try to get a little bit of fresh air there.
Well, yeah. So what I was going to say was that as it is, I don't have really like a DVD collection anymore. I don't really have like a CD collection anymore. All of those things are easily Spotify. I've got my subscription for my music. I can stream whatever video I want. In terms of going out, groceries was the grocery store is open all the time. I can go anytime I want. So now it's a matter of having to make up a shopping list. Go once a week. Be careful. New York is a different kind of town than where I live, and I have to believe that just getting from point A to point B is a more stressful thing. I've seen a lot there's fewer trains running, and the ones that are running are still moving people around, and people are packed in tighter. So, I mean, are you choosing to walk if you have to go out?
Yeah. I mean, I have not left, I would say, a 10-block radius of my apartment in a month, because it is one of those things where everything is condensed enough. You can get to other places. You can walk to other places. It's already scary enough kind of walking, because even if there are far less people on the street, you do see people. And you're constantly questioning in this sort of zombie movie way, is that person infected? Am I infected? Am I infecting them? Do I not know? Am I symptomatic? All of that. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly terrified to go on the subway. I mean, it's like, it's one of these things that cuts both ways about New York being such a great walking city and also having such a great public transportation system. It's not one of these places that is more reliant on, you driving yourself somewhere, which I think in a certain way is kind of a godsend at a time like this, because you're able to go out a little bit while still being isolated. You can self-quarantine within a car and get a little bit more of the outside world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's stressful for, me to go to the grocery store right now, but, I'm in a relatively small town. I drive in my car by myself, the grocery store is lined off and everything. New York is just, there's literally no other city like it, and it's people on top of people, and you get to know those people, you get comfortable with being in that very close proximity of people right on top of you, because you have to, because you all have to share that space together. So I have to believe, as someone like you who's lived there your entire life, that this is, this is beyond just I'm staying isolated in my apartment because I choose to.
No. It definitely feels very different. And even, like people, I've seen people compare this to New York after 9/11, not to get heavy here, but there was like a feeling of, I feel like post 9/11 of, we have to go out, we have to go out and do things. We have to sort of put a brave face on. We have to return to normalcy. And this is so different because normalcy is the thing we can't do. It's not just sort of feeling the effect of something that's too large to comprehend. It's that the only way to combat it is to sort of get rid of all basic day-to-day behavior. So it's definitely strange. Yeah.
We have a lot of people asking about the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
I'm happy to answer any non-plot related questions. It's my main value to this live stream. So I feel like as long as no one reports on me to Kevin Smith, I will share as much as I can without giving story spoilers. I can talk.
If you can just block Kevin from the chat real quick. Well, first I'm gonna retouch on this. It looks like some people did get a notification that we were live streaming, but it didn't necessarily tell them who our guest was.
Well, the live stream title doesn't have the guest.
Right. So
someone said in the comments, it's James McAvoy, the new voice actor.
Lots of people have said James McAvoy.
This is Griffin Newman. He is going to be playing Orko in the upcoming Kevin Smith. I believe it's the continuation of the Masters of the Universe mythology from the actual original animated series.
Yes. Yeah. That's the biggest question people have, and it is. This show does not connect to the Netflix She-Ra that's been going, which I'm a very big fan of, but that show is a reboot. It's a reset. Correct. It's She-Ra at the beginning. It's sort of reconceptualizing all the characters. This show picks up like right from Filmation. And obviously the Filmation show was not a show that had a really tight chronological narrative, like a lot of Saturday morning cartoons. It was designed to be able to mostly be aired in any order. So it's not like this picks up from the last moment of the last episode produced. But it really, the intention is, and I don't see any reason why it won't work this way, that the show starts and it will feel like Filmation is picking up from where it left off, and then it will sort of go off in other directions. The way I feel like Kevin Smith, who is the showrunner on the show, and a lot of the other main creative people talk about it, is sort of in the same way that Masters of the Universe Classics was trying to make the way the action figures felt in your mind's eye. Like, it's not reproducing the classic figures, it's trying to make the way they felt as a kid and the way they looked on the back of the packaging and everything. This show is hopefully trying to make the show that Masters felt when you were watching it as a child. So rather than if you watch as an adult and you're like, oh, they're reusing a lot of the same animation, some of the scripts are like this and that,
So did you see the Netflix Voltron Defender of the Universe? Is that what it was called?
I did not. I did not.
Voltron, whatever the title of it was, to differentiate it from the original Voltron series. Yeah. That's how I described to that Voltron series to anybody who would listen to me, who wanted to hear me talk about Voltron. Yeah. It's the Voltron that you thought you were watching back then, but when you see the original Voltron, you go, what is this? This is like a show for kids or something. But this felt more like, let's actually tell a bit more of a continuous, a little bit more mature storyline, a little more coherency, consistency between episode to episode. So that is what I'm expecting out of this Masters of the Universe show. Just something that is, true to the spirit of it, not necessarily a legitimate reproduction of the tone and content.
Yes, it's not a reproduction, but it's very much a continuation, and it's not trying to like reimagine anything, even in terms of the visuals of it. From what I've seen, the intent is Powerhouse Animation is doing all the animation, who did the Netflix Castlevania series.
Okay, yep.
And have this sort of American anime style, and are really, really good with action and fight scenes. So one of the things was the original He-Man cartoon could not really afford fight scenes. Most of the fight scenes were someone just getting someone in like a full body bear hug and then just wrestling with them a little bit.
I think they also had an edict that they weren't allowed to show like punching and stuff. They weren't allowed to show fighting.
Totally. But this show, it's like one of the things is let's sort of have the epic battles and showcase everyone's powers in the ways that you couldn't in the original cartoon, both in terms of FCC guidelines and also in terms of budget limitations. But all of the character designs are very much going to be the characters as you know them. It's not reinterpreting anybody as much as it is sort of adapting the original designs into a more detailed animation style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Isn't Jason Mewes playing Stinkor?
He is.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be the same Stinkor I remember.
We'll see. I mean, I've been surprised at which people. I haven't heard everybody, but a lot of people are coming at it, and I think that's another thing is they see everyone else in the cast is far more famous than I am. They have a crazy cast, including Sarah Michelle Gellar and Mark Hamill and all these people.
I don't know who those people are. I've never heard of them.
I like TV actors.
Send me some links.
But they, I'll see if they have a YouTube page.
Okay.
A YouTube page?
But they, everyone's trying to do something that, if not a straight-on impression of the original voice actor, is really trying to sort of keep the spirit alive. No one's trying to revolutionize, or dramatically change anything. And I think the goal is, as you were sort of saying, it's like making the show that was kind of in your mind's eye as a kid, finally with the resources, but also knowing that the fan base is older and that they have taken this mythology seriously, so the show can take it just as seriously. But also that it's really kind of designed to be a miniseries. Like there's a very clear story being told across these episodes. And, I would love to keep doing it and hope that we get to do a bunch of seasons. But also, there will be a full kind of complete thing told, which I think is really exciting. And it feels like kind of an exciting, it's like if the live action Masters of the Universe movie was just kind of a movie based on Masters of the Universe, this feels like the movie that would be a continuation of the cartoon, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I know you didn't record with any of those really famous people.
I didn't. No. It's all done separately. There was a moment where we thought we were all going to do table reads together, which, just as a nerd, I really wanted to do, because I wanted to A, meet everybody.
Yeah.
But B, also I wanted to hear everyone's takes on everything. Because I was just geeking out seeing the list of who all was playing whom. But a lot of them are still kind of surprises for me. So I worked with Kevin Smith. Is very hands-on, the person directing every voice actor. But it's also this weird thing where you work in a bubble doing it on your own. And then the other weird thing with Orko in particular is that Orko has always been done with a lot of post-production tinkering. His voice is always so modulated and sort of like computerized that there was a question about how they were going to play it, and if they wanted someone to do the voice themselves, or if they wanted someone to speak in a normal voice, in their own speaking voice, and just get the line readings correct, and then later they would pitch it up. But I'm such a fan of this stuff that I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I could just do the voice, if I didn't have to rely on anything, if I could just get there, and above all else, so that when my friends' kids, like, they say, hey, do you know Griffin is the voice of Orko, that I can do the voice for them live, rather than saying, like, well, it'll sound better once they like take a pass at it.
That's the dream.
Yeah. So with my audition, I was sort of 50% doing it myself, 50% tinkering with it. And there's maybe like a month or so where I was working on trying to get the part, sending in a couple different tapes, new scenes that they were sending out. And then once I got the part, there was maybe a month and a half between that when I started recording. And in that time, I just every night in my bathroom for at least an hour a night, like did the vocal exercises to try to figure out how can I get my voice pitched that high? How can I do all of this? Like it helps that I'm close enough to Orko as a starting point. I'm not Barry White.
Yeah, if I close my eyes, I can see it.
You can see it, but I was just like, I want to just close that gap as much as possible. So I think the plan is what you hear when the show premieres will largely be my real voice with only 5%, 8% kind of tinkering on it.
Yeah. And obviously,
but the goal was very much like we want this to sound like Filmation, you know? This should be what these characters sound like in people's heads.
Chat wants to know if you're allowed to do anything, if you're allowed to say something in the voice.
They want a line.
Oh, I feel like I can't. I know that's
fine.
I feel like I can't. Also, just because if I did it now poorly.
Right.
Like Rusty without any warm-ups, and then everyone heard that, and that's what got circulated. They would certainly be angry at me.
I'm not watching it because Orko sounds like crap. I heard him on the Toy Galaxy live stream.
Right. This guy has no idea what he's doing. I saw the live stream. Yeah. It is one of the things, though, like, I feel like I've removed toy hunting from, like, the routine of my life, which I feel like for most people probably watching this live stream, that's a similar thing you're kind of dealing with. And in New York City, we have less of like the Targets and the Walmarts and the sort of places that are both essential businesses but also carry toys. We have like supermarkets and then comic book stores, and the big box stores don't really exist as much in the city anymore. So my like toy hunting has now just been replaced with methodically combing through eBay and trying to fill in every last item in my Orko collection possible.
Yeah.
So that's become it. Yeah. I mean, it's like every time when I do my once a week grocery shopping, I'll do a Walmart run. Not Walmart, I'm sorry, Walgreens run. Where they obviously have a smaller selection, but I'm always hoping maybe I'll find like a Legends Doctor Doom. Like maybe I'll find something good, so I get a little bit of that fix again, but it doesn't happen. So it's all just Orko eBaying these days.
Yeah, so I know you were collecting toys before you were cast as Orko. Did you do the same thing with Arthur? Did you go back and were like, I got to get all the Arthur toys? Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Because I'm a big collector in general, arguably too big of a collector. And Tick and Masters were both properties I loved and had figures from prior to getting the parts. But then it was like, once I got the job, it was like, oh, I can justify to myself that this is some way work related. And now just try to build a collection of every different interpretation of this character.
Yeah.
So I have most of the original Bandai animated Tick line at this point. I might be missing one or two figures. But I have every Arthur, including like little Taco Bell Arthur and, the wind-up toys and all that sort of stuff. And with Orko, there's even more of it. There's just so much of it over almost 40 years now. I mean, it's like I've been using He-Man.org a lot, which has a pretty good database of merchandise to also just try to figure out, like, did they ever make Orko in this format? Like, did they ever do this? Am I wrong in thinking that this type of thing exists? And if it did, was it made for 2000X or was it made for the original or has it been done recently?
Yeah, eBay is a great resource for that too. Just Orko, search, whatever comes up.
Totally. I'm always doing the Orko search and going by newly listed, but then I'm also trying to cross-reference to try to figure out what things should I be keeping my eyes on now to try to figure out, to just knowing is half the battle, and you want to know what exists. You want to know what you're hunting for.
Yeah. So Orko, Arthur, Bloodshot, any other key things that you collect?
Yeah, a big Marvel Legends collector. I'd say that's the single line I probably collect most religiously. Not a completist, and I'm a real pick and choose guy, so I usually avoid the Build-A-Figures unless one really tempts me. And even in that case, I'll usually try to just seek out, if I go to a convention, trying to find the one or two pieces I'm missing, or getting them off of eBay rather than getting the extra figures, because I don't love having characters I don't love. And it's a scattershot thing. I mean, I like having certain teams, but I also like my X-Men team is a mush of multiple different X-Men teams at this point, And it's like, I have a good chunk of the Jim Lee X-Men, but I'm not just trying to get the Jim Lee X-Men. And I'm also sort of working on the giant size, but they're ultimately going to exist, like, side by side,
Did you post a collection video yet? Where can I watch that?
I didn't. I need to. That's sort of my big quarantine goal, is figure out how to organize my collection by the time that this is done, because it is not organized by any means.
Yeah.
I have nothing that can sort of be showcased to people. But yeah, a lot of that, a lot of NECA, because I'm a big movie fan, and it feels like they're constantly doing the best movie figures, and so many of my favorite movie properties. I was all in on their Planet of the Apes line. I was like a completist on that, and was really disappointed that didn't last longer. But then, their Terminator figures, Alien. I mean, there's nothing I'm a completist on, but there are a lot of different lines I dabble in.
That's like you.
And that's me. That's you just described my collection exactly. Yeah, no, I have to be careful, because when I get too close to having too much of a collection, then that completist side comes out, and then I'm buying things I don't actually want or need. So I find the fewer figures I can get from a line keeps me in check. Just get the few that I actually want. Keeps me safe. And on the right path.
What's that toy box percentage then? Because you have like 90% of those.
Of toy box?
Yeah.
No, they've actually come out with quite a few figures in the last year or so that I've missed out on.
Oh, okay.
They put out that stupid 6-pack, and that had Doctor Strange War Machine in it, and that really messed up my whole vibe.
I was all in total completist on Disney Infinity. Like, that was a line. The game I was all in on, and the figures I had every one down to the variations, save for the ones that were like only giveaways to employees.
Yeah.
And so the toy box thing, when that started, I was just like, I can't do this again.
Not again.
Because it is, as much as with hindsight, part of me wishes I would have waited and gotten the articulated figures instead, as much as I liked playing the game. I just was like, this is too soon. It hurts too much. I can't go through this again.
Yeah, that's it. As far as the game was concerned, Infinity, I had a handful of figures at most, because I wasn't playing the games. I basically had gotten all the Star Wars stuff, and then a couple of the Marvel figures. So once Toy Box hit, I was like, oh my god, they made this line for me because I waited. Thank you.
Yes, you got lucky. You played that one correctly. And that was one where I fell into being a total completist with every single thing they produced, just because I don't know if it was the added engagement game, and that the game constantly would give me the FOMO that I don't necessarily feel if I'm looking at a shelf and seeing which figures I've selected, because I'm like, I know why I picked these figures. Whereas every time I open up the game would somehow remind me of something I didn't own. There would be some hole there, And then there were always like these unlocks. If you have everything, you unlock this. If you have everything from one property, you unlock this. You don't get a lightsaber until you have every figure. So then I'm buying the Angelina Jolie Maleficent? Like, why do I have this?
There's like the game. There's the actual game that you play, but then there's the game of capitalism that you also have to play.
Both. And I remember I did the same thing, Marvel Mini-Mates, when that first started, 97 series ago. I was a total completist on, because it felt like they're cheap enough, they're small enough, it's a nice format to have like a whole galaxy. I'm a big Marvel guy, you get the variations, you get the sort of modularity, all that sort of stuff. And it was like, still, I'm willing to put the effort into, that was back when they would have like one chase per wave. That was a little harder to find, but wasn't punishing. And then once it started becoming like, well, they're 4-packs, but they're also 2-packs, but the 2-packs at Toys R Us are different, and this and that, I just, like, I out of self-care, I think, pushed away.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. If I'm still committed to having every single one of these, the 4 different Cyclops visors, I will lose my mind.
Exactly. No, you have to draw the line at some point. Hasbro broke me with Captain America, because at a certain point I was like, I had every Captain America figure that had ever been created, all 10 of them, like,
sure.
Secret Wars and Mego and everything. And then just once that first Captain America movie came out, once Avengers came out, it was just like, you can't do it anymore. And you hit a point where you have to say, either I'm all in on this one thing,
right,
or I have to just walk away from trying to be a completist with it.
Right. I mean, it's nice that Orko and Arthur are both manageable collections.
Yeah.
Like, the only things that I'm very disciplined about, you are trying. The explicit goal is to be a completist here.
Yeah.
They're very manageable. And even Orko, it's there are less than 10 figures of him across any line, across any format, including paint variations, major variations.
Yeah.
There are less than 10. So that you're able to wipe out pretty quickly. Even the more expensive ones aren't unreasonable, There's the SDCC Classics one that's color changing and translucent is the one that's hardest to get your hands on. And then even outside of that, when you go to as I'm checking the resources and He-Man fan sites and stuff like that, I'm sometimes relieved where I'm oh, thank God they didn't make an Orko toothbrush. I'll look into the subcategories and see the things, because just for a couple years there, they were making everything with some collection of He-Man characters. And sometimes I'm relieved that Orko was left out, and sometimes I feel man, I wish I had an Orko along with that.
Do I have to get a Funko Dorbs? Let me check. I don't know.
Yes, have it completely. Yes.
Excellent.
But there is that fun of sort of when you're less trying to go all in on a line and more trying to go all in on a character like that. As long as it isn't a character like Captain America, who is such a daunting task, it's kind of nice to have a little mantle and to see so many different interpretations of the character, both in terms of what version they're depicting, but also different toy companies and different time periods and different types of toys. It just always I joke that it's my dais. I mean, when we were filming Tick, I had all the Arthurs in my dressing room, and it was sort of what I would pray to. Not literally, but it was a thing where when I came in the morning, I'd look at it, I'd be right, that's the character. That's the character that I love. This is the history of it, keeping that in the back of my head. And I have that my window now with all my Orkos.
Did 2000X, did that series factor into any of your sort of character research, or your just knowing the full breadth of what had actually been done with the character? Yeah.
2000X. I mean, I'm younger, so 2000X was the He-Man that I really actively lived through.
Younger than what, Griffin?
Yeah, younger than some. I'm on the younger side. I'm in my 30s, okay. But I had an older friend at summer camp who was a massive He-Man fan when I was young, and he got me into it. Coincidentally, right as Mattel was starting to ramp up the 2000s reboot. So that was when they did the commemorative re-releases, when they sort of reproduced the original figures. Did your guys' audio cut out? Or you just said that you have no idea what I'm talking about?
We're just whispering secrets.
Gotcha. So it was that then leading into the 2000X and 2002, and I watched that religiously. I mean, I was watching every episode live. When I was probably too old, I was in an awkward high school phase to be watching He-Man weekly, because it was mostly either younger kids who were getting into it at that point, or older people who had grown up with the original version. And I was begging friends who lived close to high school to let me come over to their place because it would air right after school ended on Fridays. And then was all in on that line. I mean, that was a line outside of variants. I was a near completist on original characters. And still have
them all?
I have most of them. Yeah. Towards the end of the line, I was never a big Snake Man guy. So like the last year of that line, when it transitioned to mostly being Snake Men, I fell off, and in the process also fell off on some of the non-Snake Men heroes that they were releasing for the first time. But I have a good majority of them, including a lot of the rare ones. But now I'm getting into that zone where like, I was watching the VHSs of the original cartoon because they would package those with the 2000X figures.
Yep.
So I had like 8 or 10 volumes of those. And then I was watching the 2000X series as it aired. And then the DVDs came out of the original series. So then I started going deeper into that because there was suddenly more of it that I could access immediately. So I was really like loving both of those shows at the same time. Both series were just kind of my entry point to Masters as a Universe, and also just the toys. It was like it was all of it. So I'm kind of I'm sort of an omnivore in a way, because I was just like, there's no as much as this show is the continuation of the Filmation version, I kind of love every single version of it. I love the comics. I love both cartoon shows. I love the live action movie for what it is. Like, I've always just sort of been all in on the property as a whole.
Wow, so getting Orko was probably a very big deal.
Huge. And when Dan was in New York for a toy fair, I filled him in on it. But it was like, it was a very specific goal of mine. Like, it was a thing. I actively sought out. I heard that the show was happening through the grapevine before it officially been announced. And I just immediately started putting the work in and going like, do I know anyone who's working on this?
I remember you posting on Twitter, yeah.
Right, I'm going to tweet about that, like all of it. And I think when I called my agent, like frantically, and was like, this is the number one priority, I have to play Orko, they were a little confused. Like, they were like, that's not the lead character. This is the number one thing you want to do. And I was like, it's Orko. It's He-Man, it's Orko. Like, look, honestly, I'll play any character on this show, but Orko is the goal. And it was like 4 or 5 months of like working it from every angle I could, doing the research, practicing, until finally the auditions opened up, went through those rings, and then got to finally do it. But it was one of those things that I just was like, much like with the Tick, it was like a thing I loved, a thing where I loved multiple versions and loved that character, and never even thought in the abstract about playing that character. And then the second I heard they're doing a new version of it, it was just like laser focused. Like, oh, that's what I have to do. That's what I have to do. And I'm not going to be able to live with myself unless I feel like I did everything in my power to try to get the part. And those two are like the two examples where I've really sought something out that heavily. Like, there are other jobs I've wanted, but in terms of like me caring about a character that much, a property that much, wanting to be part of it that badly, those are the two that I've just like single-mindedly hunted down.
And you didn't know who the other cast members were.
No.
Did you find out the day we all found out?
I found out a little bit before, but even then I didn't have the full list. But I didn't know. And I started meeting some of the other cast members, and then I would find out unknowingly that we were both on the same show. But yeah, it was all kind of a secret for a while. It was also such a thing, like I had been tweeting about it so much. I'd been posting all this Orko stuff like all over the internet. I'd been talking about it on my podcast, how badly I wanted the part. And then I got the part, and suddenly I had to go totally silent about it. For like 2 or 3 months, like I had already recorded my stuff and I couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And I could see like Kevin Smith would post stuff on social media about recording, making it clear that they were like in production. And I would see people who follow me going like, oh, that sucks, he must not have gotten it. Like, clearly they've hired somebody, and if it was Griffin, he'd be talking about it right now. And I was like, I'm muzzled. It was tough. It was really tough. Yeah.
Have you seen the new Masters of the Universe figures that are coming out? There's that like throwback line. I can't remember what they're calling it. Classics.
Origins.
Yeah. There it is. So it's like the original line, but more articulated, alternate hands, alternate sort of stylings, that sort of things. I don't think there's been an Orko. I'm not.
They've announced an Orko. They showed it at Toy Fair.
My question is, there's that hybrid He-Man WWE line.
Yeah.
Who's the Orko there?
That's what I'm waiting for. I mean, I feel like, I don't know if this is reductive, but I feel like the obvious answer is Hornswoggle, right?
I don't know. Is that a thing?
There's Hornswoggle, who is like a leprechaun wrestler in the WWE. I don't know if he's still active, but he is a little person who is leprechaun themed and has the sort of hijinks and magic like in his corner. It feels like he's the clear Orko analog. I'm waiting for them to come up with some sort of Orko tribute figure in that line. But it is Orko's always weird because every version of Masters, the toy line, save for, I guess, 2000X, which was mostly original sculpts, has been based on a lot of reuse. Like, Masters is based around establishing a couple bucks and modifying them. And Orko is always a character who needs 100% new sculpt.
Exactly. Yep.
Just put Orko on a John Cena body, and claim that it's Orko.
I mean, you could try.
Yeah, but I feel the way about Origins in a certain way that I feel about like the Disney Toy Box line, where at the time when Classics started, I was very unsuccessful as an actor. So those were like the real lean years of my collecting, where I would just pick up like one or two things a year when something really special came around, a property I loved or something that just looked too good to resist. And it was just like, at that time it was like $20 for a figure? That's unheard of. It just seemed incredibly pricey. What are you talking? I get it in the mail? What are you talking about? So I just didn't buy into that line early enough, save for I got He-Man and Skeletor and Battle Cat, and that was it. And then once I started getting some work as an actor in the last like 4 or 5 years, I mean, it was really once I got the tick and I suddenly had some disposable income, I then went back and have been trying to build my classics collection as much as possible. So I've been filling in that collection years late, including several years after Mattel stopped doing it.
Yep.
And for them to start a whole new line now, I'm still trying to find Classics Trapjaw. I don't think I'm going to get in on a new line. Yeah. Like, I'll get the new Orko. If they make a new Grayskull, I might buy that to put with my Classics, because that's certainly a cheaper option than getting the Classics Grayskull in the secondary market, even if it's smaller. But Origins for the time being, I'm abstaining.
Origins potentially has the hook of being available, which is one of the biggest factors in being able to collect a toy line. Is you walk into the store and there it is, and you say, I wasn't gonna, but it's here and I'm here, and let's see if we can make this happen.
But the first year it's Walmart exclusive, right?
I don't. I honestly haven't been following it because I was like, I don't need another toy line to collect right now. I see you, Scareglow. Maybe we'll see. Yes. But you know, I don't know. Chat has a question here. We're gonna circle back to movies for a bit. If you could give a proper toy line to a movie you feel hasn't been given one, is there a movie that jumps out to you that you're like, God, I wish if I could get a figure of that character or that movie, that's one that I'd slip a 20 to NECA and say, make this happen.
Yeah, this has been my answer for a while, but recency bias because we've been watching them for the podcast. My dream would be to see NECA do an all-encompassing Mad Max line, sort of like what they do with Aliens, where like each series can focus on a different movie or can have a mashup of different ones.
I feel like that's a made-for-them property.
I know. And I feel like Randy talks a lot on Twitter about that it's just a complete dead end in terms of licensing. There was the N2 Toys line, which then was sort of canceled very abruptly, and the remaining figures were supposed to be released, never were, including the car. And the stories I've heard there are that it turns out they never properly settled the licensing before they started making the figures and selling them.
Wouldn't surprise me.
And that sort of burned George Miller off of it. That George Miller retains a lot of the Mad Max rights himself, which makes it different from a lot of other big franchises where the studios are the ones deciding who to license to. So there was the run of Funko Pops and Mystery Minis and a couple Fury Road things like a couple years ago, but Funko also said that they were going to do proper 6-inch articulated figures, and they never happened. And I wonder if it's just the same dead end that everyone seems to hit with that property. But yes, I just like watching those 4 movies recently. I was like, I want all 4 Maxes, and I want the villain from each film, and I want the side characters from each film. Like that's the shelf that I dream of the most, and it feels like so in their aesthetic. It would to have a Mad Max on the same shelf as like the T-800 and Ripley and all of them. It just seems perfect.
Yeah. No, it's definitely the kind of character that is within that same sort of spectrum of look and feel and design, and tone.
And also right, and that like it's got a wide breadth of characters, but also a lot of reuse potential that I know NECA always looks for. There are a lot of different variants you can do. You can reissue most of those characters multiple times. It just like it feels like it would be perfect.
I fell into Predators. I didn't want to. And then people kept sending them to the P.O. box, and I was like, this one's pretty cool, this one's pretty cool. Hey, they have a glow-in-the-dark one. Hey, they have a couple clear ones. I'll grab those. And then I was actually on eBay the other day looking up that it's the Predator that's... it's called, what is it, Insect Hunter or something like that. It's the one where the Predator's mask looks like a xenomorph helmet. And I saw it at a convention a few years ago. And I was, I'm in it for the thrill of the game, right? The hunt. Like I want to haggle about pricing, like that's more important to me than actually getting the thing. Yes. We were $5 apart. I was at like 40. He was at 50. I said 45. He didn't want to go, and I walked away. And I was like, I'm such a dummy. I should have just paid the $5, gotten the figure, because now it goes for like $100. And I'm like, what are you doing to yourself here? Yeah. A, why are you looking up Predator figures?
You don't even collect Predator figures.
Collect Predator figures. And B, you could have had it. You could have had it 3 years ago for $5 less, but you're stupid.
Yeah. Well, that's like I love most of the Alien franchise. So even if I'm not a completist, I have an interest in representations from the different films and the different, video games and comics and whatever, but also just, because I'm all in on the franchise, they're able to tempt me with, oh, it's the Alien you like, but it's green this time, like any cool color variations. With Predator, because I really just like the first movie and I'm not so hot on any of the other ones, I've really shown restraint, and I'm just like, I have a Jungle Hunter, I have a Dutch, that's my setup. I just really want, if they ever made the rest of the team, if they made the rest of Dutch's,
I
didn't get the Hawkins because it just felt like, well, I wouldn't just have Dutch and Hawkins, but if they ever made everybody, I would have that full team. But then certainly just from a figure perspective, like a lot of those Predator Kenner tributes, there's like the lava one that's red translucent, and I'm much like you, where there are just certain toy aesthetics I'm almost always into, like cool helmets and cool tech and glow in the dark and translucent stuff. And it's just like, I just had to go like, you can't, because the Predator line seems like such a slippery slope. Clearly, some people started giving them to you free. They gave you a free taste, and now you're jonesing all the time.
I don't want it.
Yeah, but like when I've gotten the basic Jungle Hunter, I guess I have the ultimate Jungle. I hadn't upgraded to the ultimate. I'm like, I get it. These are really, really well done.
Yeah, it was, so I was like, if I was ever going to get a Predator figure, the only one I would get would be like the one from the first movie, the one from the second movie, and then that one that they did that was boxed after the first issue of the comic book. So it was the same figure, just sort of repainted with that comic book sort of aesthetic. And I passed on the first one. I passed on the second one. I passed on the comic book one, and I was like, it's good. I'm safe. There's no issue here. And then people send them into the thing, and then there's a clear and the glow in the dark, and I was just like, I don't know. It was
even we were roaming the floor at New York Comic Con together, and we went to the NECA booth, and I was like, I'm just getting the Batman Xenomorph set. Like, I'm a Batman fan, and I'm an Alien fan. I can justify, I want a NECA Batman. I want the Xenomorph that looks like the Joker. That's in my wheelhouse.
Sound investment.
Right, all of that. And you were just like, oh, but look at how good that Predator Green Lantern set looks. And I was like, I can't. I'm not that big of a Green Lantern fan. I'm not that big of a Predator fan. But like, lo and behold, you got it. You reviewed it, or you did it on a photo booth, and I was like, geez, I wish I had that now. It looks so cool.
I'll check. I might have an extra one.
Well, I'd probably buy that off you. Someone said in the comments they'd like more mask type line for Mad Max. I would also be into that. Like here's would probably be my ideal. NECA does Mad Max, but you also get Mad Max Mini-Mates.
Yes.
So you can do vehicles in that scale and have figures that match with the vehicles.
Yeah, they did the DeLorean. They've done some vehicles.
Oh. Yeah. That's what I would fun.
Like. Or Playmobil. Playmobil could hit it.
Yes, Lego Mad Max. I would love any of these.
Yeah, I think Kit just hit the approval mark for the Lego Ideas one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's cool.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that pop up in Playmobil. Just hit all the cars. That'd be great.
Yeah. Make all the cars.
Somebody asked at one point, I don't know if this about you. Do you collect the Comtech chips?
Oh yeah.
How's that coming?
Yeah, I think I have all of them now. I mean, it was the podcast I do that is now Blank Check started out as my friend David and I wanting to do a podcast just about the Phantom Menace.
And you did.
We did. So we did this podcast called the Phantom Podcast where we only talked about the Phantom Menace, and beyond that pretended that only the Phantom Menace existed. That was the first film in a franchise that never got off the ground. It was episode 1.
I love that.
And it wasn't popular, and they never made any more of them. So a lot of it, because I'm such a big collector, I would do a segment at the end of every episode called Merchandise Spotlight, where I would talk about some weird piece of merchandise that was made for Phantom Menace, which is carried over into Blank Check. I always try to do a Merchandise Spotlight if there is one for a movie we're discussing. But so I kept on talking about the Comtech chips and how much I was just like the exact right age to get suckered in by the Comtech chips, and the feeling of knowing, oh, it's 1999, a big Star Wars movie is about to come out. This is going to be the biggest event in action figures ever. I feel like I spent like 6 or 8 months saving up money for, Force Friday or whatever it was, where I could go to Toys R Us and buy as much at once. Because I was like, this isn't going to be like when the special editions came out and I had to beg my parents to get me one figure. I'm going to be loaded. I'm going to roll in and I'm just going to clean the shelves of Phantom Menace merchandise. And then I walked into that Toys R Us and got completely suckered by the Comtech reader, which costs but it costs like $30.
That's not your fault. That's not your fault.
No. But it was one of those things suddenly where rather than getting like 8 figures, I suddenly was getting a Comtech reader and 1 figure. And so I had some of them, and then they kept on coming up on the podcast. So then I started looking for lots of them, and then I ended up getting, I think, a near complete lot of every Comtech chip that was produced, including when they started to branch out into original trilogy. It is amazing how bad the sound quality is on that. And part of me was like, is this because like the hardware has broken down? And then I'll look up the ads from the time, and it truly is incoherent. No one sounds like themselves. They clearly didn't get the real actors to do it.
Yeah,
and the actual audio quality is so poor. But I believe I might have every chip now.
Yeah,
wow.
It makes me laugh that the Comtech chip reader is essentially a larger mock-up, of the Jedi communicator, right, which is a chic lady razor.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I love
There's
that.
a specific brand of it.
Yes,
we put it in a couple
like
of
painted a little bit. I mean, they barely even modded it at all.
Yeah, they didn't do. They put like a top, like a little antenna thing on the top.
Some little greeblies. Yeah.
Liam Neeson is literally talking into the blade. Yeah. If you look,
I just love that the sort of the grooved bottom of the shoe texture pattern of the rubber handle part is on the toy, and there's no way that the designers at Chic were thinking, this is going to be a Star Wars toy at some point.
Is that the razor that Jewel did the song for? Do you remember that?
Yes, I think so.
Jewel did one song that was like a dancey mainstream song. And was it for that razor? I think it might have been, or right around then or something. A very bizarre time in history.
It also was so weird because the actual prop in the movie, when you look at the scale when they hold it in their hands, is like that big. It's like a
tiny
razor. And then
it's a tiny woman's razor.
Right. The Comtech reader itself is like a brick. It is shoe. It's the size of a shoe. And it's just one of those things where you're like, at that point in time, it took that much space to house the technology to run a microchip across it and give you a really muffled line reading. And now you could fit like 8 iPhones within a Comtech reader.
You could power a space station with that thing.
But it blew my mind for Solo and The Last Jedi. They brought back that Force Link thing that was so similar to the Comtech chip. It was like a Comtech reader you wore on your wrist, and then you scanned the figures rather than the chip itself.
Yeah, I think there was some actual Force action there as well. I didn't get into it.
I bought it. I tried it. I felt like I had to do my due diligence as a Comtech extra. Barely. The idea was if you held the figure in your hand while thing on your wrist and you waved it around, it would kind of make weapon sounds. And it would recognize which thing was in your hand. But it was, considering that it was 20 plus years later, it was not as big of an advancement as it should have been.
Yeah, no, not after World of the Simpsons had already mastered that technology.
Right, totally. Yeah.
They took that as far as it could go, did everything it could with it.
Actually
got
much.
The right actors.
Yeah, and also like probably the best possible property to do that with. Like that made so much sense. That was a line I was so all in on and regret getting rid of a lot of. Now I'm like, I had most of the World of Springfield line up until the last couple of series, including the playsets and everything. And I got rid of or sold most of them, and now it's one of those things where I'm like, I wish I had some more of those.
Simpsons is such a weird. It is lasting for so long, still going, that it has seen like an unprecedented amount of like super popularity and then almost just obscurity to and then back and then gone, and then it's just like, I mean, that toy line at this point is probably older than the original episodes were when the toy line came out. Like,
I mean, almost unquestionably, right? That line started in like 2000 or 2001.
That's exact. So it's like it's weird to think that show still has new episodes being made for a toy line that existed 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like the first 10 years of The Simpsons are just the best comedy series of all time. And then it's weird to think there are another 20 years after that. And I'm not someone who thinks that the remaining 20 years are all bad. I'll watch episodes occasionally and enjoy them. I think there are episodes and seasons that are good. It goes through peaks and valleys, but there's like a run for a decade, which is still really long for a TV show, where they were almost like unstoppable. And then another 2 full decades on from that are still ongoing.
Question from chat here from Our Customs. You've gotten Arthur and Orko as major parts now. Are there any other dream characters you'd love to play from your favorite franchises? So specifically, like you said with Orko and Arthur, those were franchises you were already familiar with, characters you already knew. And to be a part of those franchises, is there something else that jumps out at you like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, aside from the fact that I love the Tick and Masters both as universes, the commonality there is Arthur and Orko are the characters I would relate to the most, but also are the ones that realistically I can pull off as an actor. I'm very self-aware in terms of like how I look and what I'm good at playing and what I can never play. So it's like there are characters I love that I know there's just no universe actor that I would even end up doing it. So I'm trying to think of things that I would like to do.
Well, you've been lobbying for Fast and the Furious.
Yes, I mean that's my biggest one, but that's like I want to be in that universe. I don't care what character it is.
Yeah.
Fast and Furious is my favorite film franchise. I want to be in a scene with Vin Diesel, but I'll play whatever. In terms of pre-existing characters, I've been watching the Harley Quinn show on DC Universe, which I really, really like, and I think is really funny, and has made me start to go like, who would I want to play? And then I did a very tiny cameo on Supergirl during Crisis on Infinite Earths this season, which then got people like asking me online if your character could be retconned to be some pre-existing DC character, who would it be? And my answer has become Batmite. Like that's the character I would like to see in the universe.
You could
the
pull
most.
off like Mixie's Pitlick.
I know, but he's on Supergirl now.
Oh, is he? I didn't even know that.
Thomas Lennon's playing him. That would have been my answer otherwise. Because yeah, it's like here are the boxes I need to check. Needs to be a small, somewhat young-ish, or at least youthful character. And then I feel like the two things I play well are either the sort of Arthur Orko, like someone who is very nervous, trying their hardest, and often messes up, or the Batmite, like Mixaplix zone, which is like little stinker troublemaker.
Yeah.
Like kind of like magical, like sprightly, like little stinker. So I'm always sort of looking at like the properties I love and trying to see is there a character in there that I could play if there's a new version. But Batmite is sort of my answer now. I'm trying to will that into the universe a little bit. Either playing Batmite on an animated series or Batmite on one of the CW shows. But one way or another, that's my new goal.
Well, there was. Did you ever watch the Jason the Wheeled Warriors?
No.
There's like a little squire character. I just had to look up his name. Oon. He's like a little robot. Just keep it in mind. Put it on the list.
That sounds right up my alley. Yeah.
Definitely of that sort of Orko type.
Yeah.
I don't think we have anything else. I don't think we really have anything else in the chat unless you guys are seeing anything. Does anybody have any other questions?
Looking here to see. I'm going to go back through them and see if there are
There's
anyone.
also a little bit of a delay.
Oh, yeah, sure. Someone was asking about scales. I'm mostly a 6-inch guy, but like the fuzziness within 6-inch, I will also extend to I'll go down to 5. I'll go up to 7.
Well, and that's relative to is it a character you're collecting? Are you on a particular focus? If you're just getting Arthur, if you're just getting Orko, you got to get the whole spectrum.
Right.
But if it's I'm curating my collection as a whole, then yeah, it's where do I want to put my money? I'm pretty much just 6-7 inch at this point.
Yeah.
The occasional 4-inch.
That's the stuff that I like the most these days, and I'm not someone like when I look at your background in your videos, I'm like, that's kind of how I want to have my stuff displayed. I like having properties side by side. I'm not someone who needs everything to be in a sort of uniformity across different licenses. It's nice that here are NECA figures that are all roughly from the same movie genres in the same 15-year period. It's nice to have those be in a similar style. And it's nice to have some different comic book characters, from different companies be in a similar style. But I also kind of it's one of the things I like about collecting is having that variation. But just in terms of both accessibility and room and what I like in terms of detail and articulation, that tends to be the zone I go to. But then even like the Mezco stuff is a perfect example of just like a slippery slope one where I'm just like real strong parameters on this.
I can't collect that line for a couple more years because I need to know how they're going to hold up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm going to wait, and once they're all $400, that's when I'm going to jump in.
Right.
I'm just really anxious about whether or not those materials. I collected all of those. It was the Toy Biz Marvel Famous covers. I don't know if you remember that line.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And those were that sort of Mego 8 to 9 inch style, pretty fully articulated for the time, cloth outfits, mitts and helmets and masks and stuff. Yeah. Rooted hair. It was a really big deal when those came out, and I collected all those, and they just didn't hold up. There's a couple I have. My Thor still looks pretty good. But the rubber's all sticky and weird, and the printed pieces are all peeling off, and I feel like that's what Mezco figures are going to look like in a couple years.
It's also just such a bummer when not only are the figures expensive, but it takes a lot of effort to get them. So often they sell out so quickly. You're timing yourself around it to then put that investment when you're not sure how well the thing's going to hold up in a couple of years. So I have one of the Batmen, I think Ascending Knight, and I have 2 of the Gomez's that I've been able to get, and Popeye. I think those are the ones that I have. But it's that thing of just like the Popeye one is so weird
That Popeye,
kind of,
man.
It's amazing. It's one of my favorite figures I've bought, and that's one of the only. Gotta have this, and it's like it's pretty normal cloth. There's no kind of like it's not a superhero costume. It doesn't feel like it's prone to any sort of deterioration, and it's also like it's not. Oh, should I buy the Mezco Wolverine versus Marvel Legends Wolverine versus Mafex Wolverine? It's like either I'm gonna buy this 112 Popeye or I'm not going to have a Popeye. Like, this is all about this version of Popeye, how weird this is.
That Popeye figure is so good that it stops you and goes, I didn't know I needed a Popeye figure. But
totally, that was my thing.
If I'm only going to have one,
right.
That's the one.
I almost, it's like that's what I would most like out of that line. I'm sure, their Marvel and DC figures sell really well, and there's no reason for slow those down at all. But what excites me the most is the idea of them like taking something like Popeye and running it through their own house style. Because I used to love when Mezco did a lot of that sort of stuff, when they used to do their sort of stylized roto figures and would do their sort of characterizations of different characters. It was kind of cool that they were a company that wasn't just literally sculpting the source material every time.
Did you see their Dr. Zaius?
I did. It's tempting, but I still have all those NECA figures. It's really tempting. I mean, like for me, my question is, if they start to produce some of the figures that NECA never got to, that might get me in to then round out the collection I already have. But I feel like even if that Zaius looks a lot better, it's also a lot more expensive than the one I already have that cost me $0 to keep owning.
Here's my trick with Mezco figures, how to keep yourself from collecting that line. You freeze up during the pre-order.
Yes.
And then they sell out and you go, oh, thank God.
Right. Sometimes they make the decision for you whether or not you're collecting those figures. Yeah.
That 89 Keaton Batman went up for pre-order and I was like, oh no.
Right. I know.
I have to buy that.
But that's a perfect one of like, that thing looks unbelievable, but that's the one I would be most worried about deteriorating over time because it's all that sort of rubber seamless body thing. And it's like, I have the 18-inch NECA Keaton, I have the 7-inch NECA Keaton. Even if neither of them look as good, it's like, I got two good Keatons in my collection. If they came out with a Joker, they would have me. Yeah. Like if they came out with a Nicholson Joker. I don't collect Hot Toys. I don't have that. So if there was a good like 112 Joker, I would pay whatever they charge for it.
So the Mezco for me, it's always been my like Lamborghini of action figures. Where the first time I ever saw that like classic Countach, that classic 80s Lamborghini in person, I was like, it's so small. I can't believe how tiny that car is for how much it costs. It should be the size of a boat.
It constantly surprises me how small they are. And it's weird. There's some effect, and I think it's to how expensive they are and how high quality the materials are. But they end up looking smaller to me than other 6-inch figures.
Exactly. It's like, what was I expecting? It's a 6-inch action figure. Like, they're called 112.
But I always, in my mind's eye, when I see the photos, I picture them being like this. Even if I know they're 6-inch, I go, yeah, I know, but it's like this.
Yeah, it's a 12-inch figure.
Yeah, I think people just naturally sort of picture them as Hot Toys.
Cloth, all that stuff. Yeah. That's
right, and the detail's so good, the cloth, all of that. But then when I go into my comic book store and I see them on a shelf next to the Marvel Legends, they look even tiny relative to those. They just look so slight and brittle to me. Yeah. I mean, I will say though, because like when I was on the tick, selfishly, I was like, oh man, what a dream it would be for Mezco to get the license for like this show. Like when I sat around idly going like, I hope someone makes action figures. That was my dream version, just because it's like those would be the coolest. If any company is going to make them, that would be the coolest one to get. And also, if it was of me, I probably wouldn't have to pay for it.
See, I could see NECA. Yeah, it would have either been NECA or Mezco. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Or I thought Diamond Select, maybe they were doing Gotham figures at the time. I mean, I was like, you better believe, like, to be this big of a collector and then end up getting cast to play a superhero on a property that has gotten action figures in the past I was like white knuckling it the entire time. And it was so frustrating to feel that close to getting an action figure of myself and never actually getting there. And like the licensing deals were made and things would fall through, but it was just like it kept on like getting close to happening. There was never a good 6-inch deal in place, but there were other things in place that never came to fruition. And I was hoping like maybe if the other stuff gets out and sells well, then someone will make the main stuff. Like by the end, it came down to Funko ended up making pop of the new tick, like the specific Serafinowicz costume tick, or the one of the 3 costumes he had over the course of the series. And the whole time they kept on saying they were going to make Arthur. And I'm not a big Funko guy. The only case in which I really like Funko is something like collecting Orko, where it's like, oh, it's the variety of seeing a different interpretation of this character you're collecting in multiple formats. Yep. But on their own, it's not my style. But I became just 100% all in on the idea of like, I need to get this Funko. It didn't matter that it wasn't going to look like me. It didn't matter that it wasn't articulated, that it's not a thing I collect. I was like, I'm so close to this thing. But yeah.
Do you own any Hot Toys? Have you ever ponied up for one of those?
Yeah, the only one I've sprung for is I have 2 of their RoboCop releases. Which RoboCop is like just about my favorite movie of all time. So I worked at a comic book store in New York City called Forbidden Planet. Yep. It still exists, and hopefully, fingers crossed, is going to be able to weather this storm because it's one of my favorite places in the world. But I worked there for a while, and not for a while. I worked there for a handful of months. But when I was working there, I was up for a really big part in a movie that I thought I was going to get. It was like down to me and another actor, and the decision was just drawn out for like 2-3 months. And at the time this was happening, Forbidden Planet had in the store, it was like the premium format sideshow RoboCop. Yep. It was like 18 inches, mostly statue, but I think articulated arms and head. And, it cost like several $100s. And I was like, if I get this part in this movie, I'm going to quit this job and buy that and walk out the store. Like, it became like my goal of like, that's going to be right. Like, that's going to be my treat myself and my drop the mic. Like, I will have in this one job gone from being an employee to being the person who can buy the big ticket items at this store.
Yeah. And I would like to take advantage of my employee discount.
Right. Exactly. So I, that was in my mind's eye for so long. Didn't get that part. And then almost like 10 years later, I got the tick. And I went to Forbidden Planet right after I'd gotten the part. And they had and it was on sale. It was still expensive, but it was heavily marked down. The deluxe RoboCop they did that came with the chair and the voice chip and its die cast and all the alternate armor pieces for the damage. And I was like, I gotta complete the circle here.
You gotta.
Yeah, so I bought that, and then the only other I have is the other set they did where it was Battle Damage RoboCop and Murphy in his pre-RoboCop form. So I have those 3 figures. I have 2 RoboCops, 1 Murphy. One I keep as the Battle Damage with the helmet off. One I keep in the shiny mode with the chair, and then Murphy spinning the gun. But like Hot Toys is another one where I'm like, that's it. That is absolutely it. There is no other property that you care about enough where the quality differentiation is important enough that you will pay the extra for the Hot Toys. Especially also because with RoboCop, it's like one character.
Yeah.
It's one.
How you said RoboCop's your top 5 movie all time, top 3 potentially. How did you feel about the reboot?
I hated it. Totally hated it.
Me too.
But
yeah.
As a reboot of RoboCop or just as a science fiction film? Because I can understand hating it as a reboot, but as a film in and of itself, I didn't think it was that bad. I
dislike it as both, but I take RoboCop so seriously that it's hard to divorce it. I will say also, I was such an insane RoboCop purist for so long that I refused to watch the sequels for years. Like, I only watched RoboCop 2 and 3 for the first time like 2 years ago. Because I was like, I gotta peel off this Band-Aid. But part of me was just like, RoboCop is perfect. It's a perfect object. I also think it just ends so perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like such a good self-contained story that I was like, I don't want to deal with any of this other stuff. So I definitely was like, I was closed off to the remake. I went to see it in theaters, but I was like, I will not like this. I fundamentally will not
Too
like
much baggage,
this. Right. And now there's this sort of ongoing promise of doing a new RoboCop film where they bring Peter Weller back, and it's old RoboCop and it's the original screenwriters. And I'm like, I am all in on that if you get Paul Verhoeven to direct it. And otherwise,
that's not going to happen.
Right. So that's my thing. I'm like, if you do that, then that's the movie I want to see.
Yes,
and
here's my one qualification, this impossible thing that can't happen.
You know, my wife and I rewatched RoboCop again probably 3 weeks ago.
Perfect.
It's just so friggin' good.
Yeah.
And it's so subversive.
Yeah.
It's so on point in its satire. And it's that's just so lost from there. Like, that's the only one that has that. And then the studio just said, people like robots, people like cops. Let's just make a robot cop movie as a sequel to RoboCop. Yeah. And so everything after it was just a friggin' robot cop movie. Yeah. And it just lost that flavor. And I feel like any kind of reboot or anything is just not going to have that kind of bite.
Agreed. You kind of can't do it. And, you know, like, I've watched so much and read so much and listened to so much about the making of that movie. And it's one of those things that's also like Ghostbusters, where it's just like the alchemy of elements at that point in time, everyone who worked on it, where they were in their careers, where the industry was, it's really hard to reproduce. And it's one of those things where, like, when people went ballistic over the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, which I like, and people were flipping out because they were like, oh, look at it, compare it to the original. My line was always like, well, compare Ghostbusters 2 to the original.
Yeah.
But you can't do it again. You're never going to make it. You know, I'm looking at this, I think, kind of like, I'm more charitable with Ghostbusters sequels, where I'm just like, look, if it hits the basics, I'm happy. You know, if they're funny and they have the equipment, ghosts, I like living in this universe. But RoboCop, I think, also is just like, it is such a perfectly realized story. The fact that, like, by the end of it, this guy has, like, fully reclaimed his humanity and figured out who he is, and it's summed up in the final word of the movie.
Yeah.
Then when I, like, after watching it, went to watch RoboCop 2, and in the opening scene, the helmet's back on, and he's back to talking like a robot. I was like, this is depressing. Like, this, like, sucks.
Yeah, because they were just like, it's now we're going to make superhero movies.
Right. And it's like, it actually...
That's not what it is.
No, and it's one of those things where, like, then everything that happens to the character in the next two movies in the name of trying to make cool action movies is really sad if you think about the actual, like, the heart and mind of the top we lived through in the first movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. A new robot. I think I'm like you in that I'm also more charitable about Ghostbusters. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do with Afterlife. I think the cast is great. I think that the angle they're coming at the story from is really interesting. So we'll see. But I don't know. There's just something sort of, again, there's something that's sort of so biting about the original RoboCop.
Totally.
And it just loses its tooth completely in everything else. And I just don't ever see them. You know, he did Starship Troopers sort of the same way.
But the difference with Starship Troopers, like, that's the closest he came again. But Starship Troopers doesn't ask you to actually care about the characters in the same.
Right.
Like, part of the joke of Starship Troopers is, like, they're all these kind of stupid teeny boppers, and they're like Hitler being indoctrinated into this propaganda. And the thing that's insane about RoboCop is it's like a satire in which you actually care about this main character. Like, as funny as it is, and as violent as it is, and as good as, like, the sci-fi world building of it is, the emotional story of it actually works. And usually I find with movies like that, you have to pick one or the other. You know? It's like, we don't want to laugh at the character we care about, or we can't care about a character you're asking us to laugh at, and that kind of thing. It was a thing I constantly like. I only was responsible for my little section of it, but it was a collaborative thing. But with the Tick, it was like RoboCop was a thing we were always constantly trying to reference, and it was a different show, but we were like trying to find a way to balance as many different things as RoboCop did, because it's like we wanted to make a show where in one scene you could have a character's like emotional plight be taken totally seriously and have it be an engrossing thing, and then the next scene have like a fight with a talking dog. We were like, can we do both of those at the same time? Can we have like effects and fights and drama and comedy and all of that? RoboCop's, it's just like it's the best execution of that for me. And also just like RoboCop, because he's a metal dude.
Yeah.
It feels more valuable to get him in Hot Toys format. I think it's why like Iron Man does. It's like I have several of the NECA RoboCops. I have the Super 7 RoboCops. Like I have a bunch of different RoboCops, but that's a character that benefits from the added cost of material.
Yeah, I've got the old McFarlane one, and then I have two of the NECA ones, the regular, and then the 2-pack with the Terminator dog. So it's
that one's amazing.
Endoskeleton RoboCop.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Good figure.
Yeah.
It's tough. Like we've already established that we watch movies differently for different reasons.
Yeah.
So I get pulled in by it's just a robot guy. It's a robot cop fighting another robot thing. I'm in. That's really all I needed to see. I don't need the subtext. I mean, subtext is nice if you want to work some in, but I will also attend for just robots punching each other.
Totally. But even I mean, there's so many other movies that I think work better as a modern RoboCop than the RoboCop remake.
That's a good point. Yep.
Like even like Bloodshot, which I like disproportionately more than most people, largely because I'm such a big Vin Diesel fan. I was watching it and I was like, this is kind of a better RoboCop remake than the it's still the same thing of this guy wakes up, they've rebuilt him, he's got new technology, remember his past life and his wife that he lost. Like it has the same basic emotional setup in a lot of ways. It's scratching that itch better for me. And usually I'm able to like divorce remakes and reinterpretations because you still have the original version. And in a way, I would rather people do something more different. I don't want to see people make the same thing again. I'd rather they take bigger risks and bigger swings and cast very different actors, different aesthetic. I mean, whatever it is. But RoboCop is one that I'm just like, I'm so protective of. And especially because, as you said, Greg, it's a movie that somehow was able to do all of it at the same time that I see no possible angle at which someone could improve. Like, there's no way you could go like, well, but our version of it is more this. And you're like, they did it. They did all of it. It was all of it at the same time.
I was reading that they're talking about doing a RoboCop prequel. I'm definitely interested. I made that up. I don't know. It's just called Two Cops.
It's just called Cop.
Yeah, it's called Human Cops. I'm writing it.
Yeah. Sounds good. It sounds good. I'll play like RoboCop's annoying.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned in the chat you could be T-Bob on Mask.
You cut out for a second. Who could I be?
T-Bob on Mask.
Ooh. I could, yeah.
That would work.
That is good, yeah. I continue. Anyone who has any suggestions, I'm happy to hear them. I need new jobs to seek out.
And Mask is keeps getting brought up as potential Marvel Hasbro shared universe potential there. So
no, it is one of those things where it's just like everything is gonna get rebooted at some point.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, no, it's getting rebooted.
Yeah,
no, it'll happen.
And also probably several times.
Yeah,
we'll see.
So what's your production schedule on the podcast? You got a show coming up here?
So we drop new episodes. They drop Saturday at midnight. So there'll be an episode going up tonight. Our podcast originally would drop on Mondays. And then one time our producer uploaded it early on Sunday, and then people got used to that being the time.
Oh, no.
People complained who lived in different time zones at that time for them. So he this is the final pushback. It goes up midnight Eastern Standard Time, Saturday. Please never bother me ever again. So we have an episode on Beyond Thunderdome coming out tonight at the time that we're recording this, going through the whole George Miller series. Yeah. Which has been really fun. It's weird. I mean, we tend to record our episodes in advance and bank them up as much as we can. So we recorded most of our episodes before COVID-19 really hit the States in a major way and everything shut down. And it's ended up being, unfortunately, good timing to release a bunch of podcasts about society crumbling and people fighting for resources. But it's like I rewatched all these movies so recently, and then now we've finished recording them now, but we've recorded the remainder episodes on his other films that are less apocalyptic after the real world apocalyptic event happens.
So I know you did some stand-up comedy in the past. I watch a lot of stand-up comedy on like Netflix and those sorts of things. What I've found happening more and more recently is like I can't watch a special from somebody that takes place before whatever the most recent cataclysmic event is, because I don't want to be reminded of the time where these jokes were funny in and of themselves. Like, you need to put it in context for me. I need to know that you're being able to make me laugh after this horrible thing occurred.
Right. It's also such a weird thing too now, where like you go on Twitter and everyone's a comedian, but it is that thing of like, if anything happens you go on Twitter and even if you only follow 50 people, you're seeing 10 variations on the same joke. You know, somehow they're ending up in your feed of people riffing on whatever the shared experience is or whatever the new news item is, you know, or whatever the new celebrity mess up is or whatever. That to do something like a stand-up special that takes a lot of time to develop, you know, you have to go out there and you have to work on each joke one at a time and build up a whole set and then tour it as an hour or half hour enough times until you know the flow of the whole show is good, and do that enough times that you feel confident enough to film it. It's a weird format now because it demands that you take a lot of time and energy and thought into crafting things perfectly. And so often now we're looking for like, it's an obvious thing, but it's weird that now by the time like Saturday Night Live gets to most news events, they feel old.
Right. Exactly.
And it used to be something would happen on a Wednesday and you'd go, oh my God, thank God there's a new Saturday Night Live this week. You know, as like a comedy nerd, I would feel like, thank God they're not a rerun this week. I've been waiting for someone to comment on this.
Yeah, what's their take going to be? Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And now it's
moment.
Like,
yep.
Totally. And you have like 10 different late night shows that are each doing jokes on everything at the end of each day, not to mention everyone on Twitter and everything else, that by the time SNL gets to it, they like, their only solution is to cast famous people as everybody.
Yeah.
That's their workaround. It is a weird thing. I'd sort of backed away from stand-up just because the tick happened and it was really time-consuming and it pulled me away from it. And it's sort of like going to the gym, where once you get off of the routine of it, it's really hard to get yourself to start again. Because much like exercise, stand-up is like, you feel really good after you've done it, and the idea of doing it is really daunting, and even while it's very taxing, but it's ultimately very rewarding.
I feel like that with these streams.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
There's a lot of that in life right now for us.
Totally. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting back into. That was the other thing, was just like the world started changing so much and comedy exploded so much. And I was like, what do I even have to say anymore? You know, I haven't done it seriously in a couple of years. I'd have to start over from scratch. The material I have isn't like relevant anymore, either because the world's changed or because I've changed or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to get back into doing it. I did a show and I did like 15 new minutes and I felt so good about it. And I was like, that's it. I'm booking like 8 more shows, and then the world shut down.
No more public gatherings.
Yeah, it was like the Sunday before that Wednesday. And I think I was supposed to do a show that Wednesday night that then got canceled. It was like I had booked up most of March being like, I got like 8 or 9 shows I'm going to do. I'm going to get back into the flow of things. So now the idea of going back to it after this feels like even more scary. I'm like, how do you tell jokes after this?
Yeah, it doesn't have the same impact when you're doing it on a live stream or a YouTube video, just like waiting for the laughs that never come.
Right, but it's this like thing, it's like, well, there is the immediacy of it, but then also there's you're performing in this weird vacuum. It's like we're just having a conversation, the 3 of us, knowing it's for an audience, but the audience is so abstract because it's just a stream of text next to us.
Yeah. Yeah. I bring it up because
people would be giving us standing ovations, gales of laughter.
I bring it up because I cycle through the Netflix things looking for something to watch, and I'm like, hey, Jim Gaffigan, talking about Hot Pockets, that's funny, but I need to know that he's making those Hot Pockets jokes in the context of what's going on right now. Even if he doesn't change the joke, I need to know that date is right. And it's like, okay, he knows what's going on right now. This isn't pre-pandemic Jim Gaffigan. This is current Jim Gaffigan making the Hot Pockets joke.
The end of every stand-up special's title should be the date and time it was recorded in brackets.
Yeah.
So when you're scanning through, even if it's not that up to date, I can place myself back in the head space of knowing exactly when this was done, what these audiences were thinking about.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, we should probably wrap this up here.
I think so.
Griffin, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, that's a pleasure.
It's been obviously awesome to talk to you again and get a little bit of insight on the show coming up and everything that you've been working on. Thank you to everybody in the chat for hanging out with us here.
Super appreciated.
For those of you just joining us, sorry. See you next week. 7 o'clock. Get here a little earlier, folks.
I will say though, I think it's like it's a weird time for people who are making stuff on a regular basis to then continue making that stuff as if nothing has changed. Especially what you guys do at Toy Galaxy, where it's pop culture and it's action figures and it's largely devoid of influence from world events in that kind of way. And I know for me, as I've been, feels silly sometimes when you're like sitting down and working on this stuff that feels so irrelevant in light of the state of the world. But truly, I just want to say to you guys, it has been such a bright spot for me that I still am getting like Toy Galaxy videos on a regular schedule, that they are sort of the same as they ever were. Like I know, much like your Gaffigan test, that they're being recorded post-pandemic. It helps keep that in mind, but I love that you're just talking about Thundercats still the same. It's a brief little window of normalcy, and it really it calms me down. It's a real delight every time I see a new video show.
That's great to hear.
Excellent, man. Thank you very much again. Good luck, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Cool. Talk soon.
Bye, everybody. Cool.